let's talk about the main topic, because
Here,
everyone's here.
Go watch that video.
Go watch the video. Go watch it.
Go watch that video.
And subscribe to the channel. I do lots of those kinds of things. So yeah, thanks for putting that up. Okay, so
Yep.
let me get back over here. So let's talk about what just happened the other day. So
yeah, why the reason we are all here is
one of the reasons,
that sucker right there.
Right there. So if you follow this channel, you know this already. If AES SSL just renounced and just released the baby brother to the Origin that we have, the 32 channel, the Origin 16. Which, for all intent and purposes, is they took a chainsaw and they just cut it in half. And that's the Origin. Everything about this console, from what I've seen and what I've read and what they've said, is identical to the 32 channel version. There are no features that have been eliminated. The only thing that's been eliminated is 16 faders. That's it.
Yeah. They essentially took a Sawzall to your console, cut it right down the middle, cut it right down next to the master section, slapped an end cap on, and said, "Hey, look, new console."
Yeah,
so,
they basically went to my center section and just cut the right side of the console off and put an end cap and said, "There it is."
Yep.
So
there
now,
you go.
the reason why they did this is because the Origin is extremely popular. It's funny because we always get, well, not anymore, but we used to get lots of people say, "Oh, what a waste of money. That was the worst console you bought. It doesn't have this and doesn't have that." The Origin was an amazing selling console for SSL. I know that to be true because I do talk to people inside of SSL. They were actually surprised how many of these consoles they've actually moved, because at that time, which is now 55, 60 grand, but at that time, just under $50,000, you had a 32 channel, 64 input. Actually, it's 72 input if you include the center section of Mixdown for under 50 grand with 32 EQs, 32 drive preamps, a whole talkback section. I mean, for the money in the console world, as we've talked about many times, you really get a lot of bang for a buck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even more significantly too to me is 8 stereo buses. 8 stereo
buses. Right. So but even at which now to be about $55,000, $60,000, people loved it, but there were people that were saying, "Hey man, that's still a little bit too far to my budget," but not so much the budget, but also the physical space that it takes up. Even though the Origin is not very big, but it is still pretty big. I mean, it isn't, it's not a small piece of equipment, and it weighs 450 pounds. I mean, it's a big sucker.
Yeah, it's what is it, 60 inches or 72 inches wide? I mean, it's 5 or 6 feet wide.
72 by 43, so it's 6 by whatever. It's not a huge console like the old style SSLs, but it's still a big piece of equipment. So they decided
it's 6 by 4 feet. It's the size of a full size bed. I mean, it's a big piece of furniture.
It's a big piece of furniture. No doubt about it. I mean, so they decided, based on the feedback of the size and also the feedback of the price point, they said, well, the Origin did so well. What if we made a 16 channel version, knocked almost half the cost down? So now I think that console's about 40 grand or 38 grand or whatever it is. Zone are saying 39.9, so 40,000. Okay. So it's about 15 to 20,000 less than a full size. And you're getting all the same features, except you're getting 16 channels instead of 32 channels. But you actually get 16 long, 16 short. So you have 32. I think they said the total input is 56 channels at Mixdown. So you still can do 56 channels of Mixdown, which is still pretty good. It's a lot.
That's a lot.
At, a much more reachable, if that's the proper word, cost-wise, and it also doesn't take up as much space either. So
it is. It's an attainable budget for a smaller studio or another type of facility that wants that kind of capability, but doesn't need a board that big, or doesn't have a $70,000 budget to go buy a board. I mean, it's an attainable piece of equipment for them.
Again, in the console world, I mean, we always got to go back and say, like, people say, well, I could buy a 32 channel Behringer X32 for $4 grand. That's not this. I could buy a Studio Live by PreSonus. Wonderful piece of gear. That's not this. Not what it is. That doesn't have any sound. That's digital. This is a true analog desk. So people that know analog, a lot of the people that are here that understand that, this is what that is. So this kind of sits between the big sixes and the 32 Origin. It's in that middle.
Yes.
It's in that
Yep.
middle range. And so, yeah, I mean, a couple of people asked me, well, if that was out before you bought yours, would you have bought this or the 32? I still think I would have personally bought the 32. And the reason why is because before I bought an Origin, before there was an Origin, I was looking at Neves, the Genesis Black. And I was looking at a 16 and a 20 channel, and I wanted 32 long faders. I wanted 32 faders. And a lot of the sessions that I personally do, I'd say 50% of them can get on 32 faders. On the other 50%, I'm using 40 faders, sometimes 48 faders. No, I'm not using 64. I mean, I have some sessions that I could do 64, but I don't want that many faders to manage. I'll comp it all in the box. But I feel for me personally, I think this new one, as cool as it is just not enough faders for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, it's a use case thing. I mean, like I said, like you're right too.
Yes.
It's a use case thing. 16 faders is really, really good for small project recording studios or broadcast facility, you know what I mean? Something like that would be a great board for that. But for doing like a full scale mixing console, 16 EQs is not enough. Okay.
Yeah, you have to truly be, and again, nothing wrong with it. You'd have to truly be more hybrid. You would find yourself using probably more plugins because of the limitations, but that's not a bad thing. It's just something to consider. So to me, the $20,000 difference, well, for me, it was only about 10,000 because I bought mine before they all went up. So I paid under 50 grand for my console. So for 50 grand versus 40 grand, that extra 10,000 or today's prices, the extra 15,000. Yeah. And again, I'm a little different in this as a business. So as a business investment, $15,000 for me, I would still go with the 32.
Yeah.
But if you have the space and you have the budget, that's what I would do. But I can see where this can fit in a lot of home studios, Dave, not even commercial facilities. I can see this going into a lot of personal studios, people doing their own work, their own productions, those kinds of things. Yeah. Because you still have 32 faders at Mixdown. You have 32 long, 32 short. So you still have quite a few. You still have quite a few there, you know. Touchtone says his next purchase, this will be his next purchase, but then he'll stay on the Big Six. Cool, man. Yeah, I mean, it's still
he's got a man with a plan.
It's still a man with a plan. Nothing wrong with having a plan, man. David S.J., you mentioned that the Origin 16 being useful in a broadcast scenario. What sort of broadcast event could you see it useful at?
Oh, anything. I mean, I think the thing that first came to mind for me would have been something like a worship type of a console for like a small church that's broadcasting, or even a larger church that's broadcasting. Is because like you got your 16 faders, so like you can have like various things, or you can mix down a band into it or whatever, and then you have your 8 sets of stereo subs so like you can assign some to the house, you can assign some to a broadcast, thing.
That's
you
flexible.
can assign some to a recording. You know what I mean?
Flexible.
It's a very flexible console for something like that to do. And I could definitely see it being useful for something like that, or even for very small scale film mixing. You know what I mean? Like soundtrack mixing, something like that, and so forth. And yes, it seems though that the digital is taking over the live event market. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. But some people would prefer, something like this too. It's all a use case, D. Carmichael. It's all a use case. You know what I mean?
Bobby says, what do you mean by long and short? Okay, so you may not be able, let me see if I can find a photo of it here on their site. But so you have 16 channel over here. Where's my mouse?
There it is. Go to the gallery.
Yeah,
go to the gallery and pull the top down.
Let me see if I can find it so you can see the difference here. They have long faders and where's there?
Scroll down, Dave.
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
Yeah.
You can see it
here.
See if you
can blow that up. Yeah, they have the gallery. Where's the gallery?
Oh, there it is. There's a better picture of it.
There you go. Yep.
So here you have the 16 long faders, and then above it right here, you'll see these smaller faders. The long meaning you have a longer throw. You have much more of a throw long-wise, and the short faders are about half of that. So this is an inline console, and the way, there's many ways you can configure this, but one of the more traditional ways is that when you're recording, you could be you have two sets of inputs. So let's say long fader channel 1, you have a long fader channel 1 and a short channel fader 1, both on this desk and on my desk. Those are two inputs, two independent inputs. What that means is you could be recording your kick drum in on your short fader, but you can be mixing it and you can be setting the recording levels and everything with the short fader, and then you could be monitoring it and mixing it, or Q mixes with the long fader. But when you're
or
just
the other way around,
or vice versa, you can flip it around at the touch of a button. The only thing about that is you only have one EQ section, so the EQ can either be assigned to the long fader or the short fader independently. So you can have, let's say, the first 8 channels, you can have your EQ on the short faders, 9 through 16, you can have your EQ on the long faders, however you want to do it. So, but when you're just mixing, because you have two separate inputs, these become completely independent. So you don't just have 16 channels of mixing or 16 faders, you actually have 32. So what that means is you could bring 32 channels from your DAW into this and mix with 32 faders. So just think of this as not track 1 short fader, long fader. In a mixing scenario, you have channel 16, channel 17 through 32 are on the short faders. Does that make sense? So it gives you more flexibility. So the one thing that SSL is really good at that other consoles maybe not so much, in the respect as it's an inline console. It can be configured and routed in almost any different way depending on what you're doing. And it's very easy to go from a recording scenario to a mixing scenario. It's not a bunch of things you got to unplug in the back of the console. It's all done with the touch of a button on the front of the console. So that's what I mean by 32 long, 32 short. The only downfall is you can't use the EQ on both. It's one or the other. And so what that means is, like when I'm working on mine, I use the EQ on all the long faders, all 32. If I have to go into any of the short faders for anything, then I'm using EQ and compression in the box. Although, just so people know, if you don't know, on both this desk and the 32 channel version, you have insert points that are independent. So I could put a hardware compressor on track 1 and on the long fader, and I could put a different hardware compressor on the short fader. So so you can have hardware independently on all of these channels, but EQ, you can only choose one or the other, just so you know. Yeah. And the preamp, the drive preamp where all the color comes from, could either only be on the long and the short. The other one's just a direct line level in. Right. With no color. You know what I mean? Transparent.
Right. Yeah.
I hope that makes sense, Bobby. Does that make sense? I mean, that's what that means. So it's extremely flexible. And like I said, the only difference between these two consoles is one has more faders than the other. None of the other features have been changed. Like I said, they didn't redesign anything, guys. They didn't go back to the drawing board. They took a chainsaw and went, and they said, here's your next product. That's what they did.
Here's your 16 channel origin, guys.
Right.
Like I said, like when we were talking about this, the other night, I said the only thing to me at this point that's a little overkill on a 16 channel origin is the fact that you're sending 16 or 32 channels, but you're sending 16 long faders into 8 stereo groups. So you basically are sending 16 into 16, you know? But I mean, I get it. I get it. There's no sense in redesigning the center section, you know? I mean, just do it, you know?
Right. Juan says, hey, Juan, what's up, buddy? Say I set up the short faders for recording and the long faders for mixing with the channel EQ strips, etc. Yep. Would the short faders act as the gain and affect any plugins in your DAW? Would the short faders act as gain?
If you are okay,
well, no, the plugins
are you sending? Are
the
you
plugins
sending
are prior
the
to the
faders?
Yeah, because remember now the short fade, the DAW is prior to, before the console, right? So if you're using plugins in the DAW, and let's say you're going out one track in your DAW, and let's say you have an EQ in a compressor, let's say, and you're sending that to a short fader, the harder you push that plugin, you're going to affect the gain level coming into the desk on the short fader.
But if you're using the short faders for recording and feeding that from the board into the DAW, then yes, if you're using
Yes.
if you're adjusting the short faders, you're changing the gain into the DAW. So if you have a plugin in the DAW that you're recording through into the DAW, if you change the short fader setting going into the DAW, yeah, you're going to change the gain. So yeah, I see what Juan is saying. What Juan is saying is like, okay, I got 16 microphones set up to record. I have them coming into the board through the discrete preamp into the short faders.
Yep.
And going out into the DAW to record, and then you're coming back out of the DAW into the 16 long faders for mixing through the drive circuits with the EQs. Then yes, if you're recording if you're adjusting your faders as you're recording in real time, you are changing the gain into the DAW.
Right. Right, that is correct. Kaiser's waiting for the SSL Big 12. Don't be surprised.
Probably not. I don't know because
Don't be surprised.
But they've already got the XL console.
Right, that's right.
I mean?
Remember, they also have the XL desk, which is basically a tabletop model of. It's not a Big Six. It's a tabletop model of almost an Origin with with no EQ, no compression. They just have a bunch of 500 racks that you can load your own EQ and compression in. They have a 16 channel version of it, I believe, and a 24 channel version of it.
Yeah, and like I said, that's kind of the bridge there. You know what I mean? That's
about a 20,000. I think unloaded, it used to be about a $17,000 console. When you finish loading it up, it could be almost 30 grand. And now you're in 16 channel Origin territory, but the difference there is you could put whatever 500 series modules you want in there. So let's say you want 8 channels of SSL and 8 channels of API and 8 channels of Neve, you can do that. The Origin, you get SSL, SSL, SSL. That's all you get. So there is a console there for everybody. I mean, those XL desks are pretty nice. They're pretty nice.
Cool.
You know, for the money, cool. They're tabletop models. They don't have their own stands, but they're tabletop models. The other thing for this particular console, before I forget, is Argosy also makes a desk for it. Now, this looks like it was shot on a GoPro, so it's it's not as deep as it looks here. That's the weird angle lens. Yeah. But you can see that Argosy builds 2 desks for this with 2 racks on the 2 wings on the side for your hardware. You wouldn't put the legs on the Origin. The legs bolt onto the bottom of the Origin. You would take those off and you'd sit it on the Argosy desk. And then they also have some flat tabletop space you could see here on either side. And the way I understand it is you can buy this desk with the wings for rack, or this can just be all flat, like producer desk, like flat table space. If you want flat tabletop space, all that here. So this turns the size of this desk into about the size of my Origin, maybe a little bit larger. So if you had a 16 channel and a couple of racks for all your hardware, that's about the same width as a full 32 channel, or pretty close. Now, the thing about Argosy is I know because they make a desk for the 32, and that desk is $10,000, which I think is absurd. I don't know how much this desk is going to be, but my guess is it'll be $5,000.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot of money. Yeah, it's going to be money.
I had an Argosy. I can tell you there are wonderful pieces of furniture and beautiful studio desks that are built. Again, my Argosy desk was probably weighed almost as much as my console did. It's heavy and it's built like a shit brick house, but it's big. It's big, man. So, so again, if you're in, if you need, that's another thing that I see that they put out here. Argosy does have a desk for it already, which is pretty strange.
I mean, they obviously spent some real serious time planning this thing out, for the launch. I mean, they've got Argosy already had a desk made for it and everything else. I mean, they obviously spent some real time getting ready for this thing. Yeah,
it's funny because I talked to some people that I had no idea this thing was coming. I mean, they were pretty tight-lipped. I didn't even know, and I talked to these, but I kind of know with a lot of these companies, sometimes when products are going to be coming, or I may not know exactly the information, but they throw hints at me. I didn't know anything about this. I was like, what? You put out a what?
Yeah. I do think it's very cool though that it has the full center section, so it's got all the all the inserts are there. The stereo and mono set, the stereo and mono channel sends are all there. I mean, it's basically
It's all there.
It's full capability, you know, and even then it's got the empty section that you can drop a UF8 or a UC1 into.
Yeah, you could
know?
put the UF8 in there. You could put a 500 rack up there, and you could put two 500 racks in that center section if you wanted to. You could put 20 modules in there if you wanted to. Kevin wants to know, hey, Kevin, good to see you. Are the 500 Series 611 EQ similar to the Origin? They are similar. I haven't compared them side by side, but it is the same EQ. I mean, it's the same. It's the E-Series EQ. So I would say, yes. Is it exactly the same? Is the circuits 100% identical? I don't know. But but I've heard them both.
Close enough to not matter.
Yeah, no, the Origin is based on the black knob, the Black Series E series. That's what it's based on. Yeah. So that's really cool. So I think this is a cool desk. I think it's a cool desk. I mean,
I do too.
Zone of recording ASP 44816 Audient Heritage Edition. Yes, Audient makes Audient is I can't say they're the only one. At the time, they were the only other desk that was very similar to the Origin. And it came out before the Origin. So I'm sure that SSL but it's a little bit different layout though. But I mean, as far as almost identical features, the Audient is very, very similar to the Origin, or vice versa, because the Audient was first. The Audient at that time was, I don't know, 10 grand cheaper. It was considerably, good amount of money cheaper.
In that range.
And I talked to the people at Audient. I didn't sit in front of one and demo it, but I did research it in my research. And I just decided that, I wanted SSL, man. I mean, there's nothing like an SSL. you know. Yeah. But the Audient, I'm sure, is a great console. I'm sure it's a great console. I don't know anything about it, but I'm sure it's great. The one that competes with, well, he's saying it's 20 grand. Not the console that I looked at. The console I looked at that was 32 channels, like the Origin, was not 20 grand. It was 37 something at that time. They may have a new one that competes with this one for 20 grand versus, what are they charging for this one? 32. They say it's 39, 40. But it's not. It's going to map out at about 32, 33 is where you're going to buy this new Origin for. Yeah, I would assume the Heritage Audio. I would assume that the Audience would even be cheaper than this Origin. I'm sure it would be. But again, when you're looking, you got, and here's what you got. And again, I know a lot of you know this, but for people that are not sure, this is worth saying, because I learned this the hard way. When you're looking for something like a console, and you're talking, if you're only looking at the price tag, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And if every single penny counts on these things, you may not be in the market for a console. You can't simply just look at the price tag and go, well, this is 10 grand. This is 12,500. This one, there's so much more that goes into these things. There's so much more going on here and there is to some degree, not everything. There is some degree you get what you pay for. And so, when you're researching these things, if you're shopping for, you should be, I feel, again, it's only my opinion. What the hell do I know? But hey, you're on our channel and it's my opinion. So
exactly,
you have a budget, shop inside of a budget. If you're shopping just at a number, you're probably going to end up buying something that you might regret. I'm not saying Audient doesn't make great stuff. I'm sure they make great stuff. All I can tell you is I've talked to guys that install both. And it's one of the questions, because believe me, I had this question. I'm not going to tell you who said it. I'm just going to tell you that I was told by someone their sole job is to go around the country and install consoles, and they install all of them. And the company that he works for sells all of them, so he doesn't care which ones they buy and which ones they put in. And he goes, I have installed many of Audience, and I also service them as well. And I have installed many of SSLs. And he said, if you had to pick between an SSL Origin and an Audient, the one that I forget the model number, the one that's the same thing, 36 grand, it's like 10, 15 grand cheaper. He goes, and if the 10 or 15,000 isn't the deciding factor, I would buy an SSL over an Audient every single day of the week. He goes, and I service these things. I know how they're built. I understand the quality. Because I'm not saying the audience, he even said, I'm not saying the audience not a good console. So I'm not saying that. He's saying the SSL is a far superior console. But so he said, when you're talking about buying console, 10 grand in the big scheme of things isn't an enormous amount of money. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and all I'm saying is that doesn't mean don't shop and get a good deal. All I'm saying is just don't look at the price tag, because there's much more that goes into these things than just that bottom line price. There just is. And there, so that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Take what you want with it. It doesn't matter. To me.
Plus something that we've said before too, and then we've said it publicly, so it's not like it hasn't been said before, but when you're trying to attract people to your thing, like you're a mixing engineer, when you're trying to attract people to your studio for mixes, putting something out there that's recognizable, like I have an SSL console that I mix through. There's a cachet to that can't be denied, and for the unwashed masses, Audient is not a name that is going to resonate to the same degree that Neve or SSL is going to resonate.
Or API.
Or API, yeah. So like I said, I mean, like we've had comments in some of our videos say that, Audient is probably like somebody who said that, like my Focusrite interfaces and your PreSonus interfaces are garbage. You should at least buy an Audient. So it's like, they obviously have their following, and I will never say that Audient makes a bad product. I mean,
no, I wouldn't say that either.
With the experience I've had with them, I think they're fantastic interfaces, and I'm sure that their consoles are extremely, are very good consoles. But the name isn't going to resonate the same as one of the big three is going to resonate. If attracting clients is a factor, that is something that has to be considered.
Yeah, and it was for me. It was clearly one for me, and it is. It's a market. It's part of my marketing. I mix on an SSL. People know the name. If you listen to any music that's been recorded in the last 40 years, guarantee you've heard stuff that's mixed on SSL. It has a very distinct sound. It doesn't mean that Audient isn't a great console. It doesn't mean it doesn't sound good. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. When I looked at a console, I wasn't really looking at, of course I was looking at price, obviously, because I would have bought a Duality if I really wasn't looking at price and have all the features that this doesn't have. But I was looking at a budget, and I was looking at features for price. What is this? What does this have versus what am I paying? That's how I kind of looked at it. And that's how I would, that's how I would advise people to look at it. I wouldn't just look at it and go, let me find the cheapest console I can get so I could say I have a console. You may not want to go down that road. That's just my opinion.